I don't think you necessarily see an Ogrepon lead in this matchup, but let's see what the win-in is. We do get the Urshifu and the Tornadus lead from one trainer, but Justin Carris starting things off with good old Indeedee and Iron Crown.
Really, I think it's kind of a safe lead for both trainers. Notably, Wolfe does not have a terrain sitter, so as soon as Justin gets that psychic terrain up, it will remain on the field for the rest of the game, which is really good for Justin. You're blocking the priority, you're boosting the power of that expanding force, and importantly, making expanding force a double target move. In this case, the Urshifu will get clean knocked out by expanding force, and Tornadus will take a lot of damage as well. The only psychic resist on Wolfe's side of the field is that Incineroar, which will come in very handy against the two psychic types and the steel type, but of course, you're not going to pack a team with Psy spam like this without Incineroar answers.
We see Tornadus kick things off with a Protect, and Urshifu, thanks to that Choice Scarf item, will use U-turn and give Wolfe the opportunity to pivot in that Incineroar. You have to assume that's exactly the Pokemon that's going to come to the field. Just like you were saying, it is really the only Pokemon on Wolfe's side of teams that can handle the expanding force, as its dark typing means that it cannot take any psychic type damage. This does mean that the Indeedee does have a moment here to get a little bit of damage in with that Dazzling Gleam, but that's so much less than the threat that the expanding force had that it's a very fair trade for Wolfe.
It's a very fair trade, and also I think a very smart non-trick room from Justin there. I think the U-turn into Incineroar was kind of the most easy, the most, forthcoming play that Wolfe could have made there. And obviously it was a great win. Like, that's very hard to punish. But at the same time, if you can see that coming as Justin, going for Trick Room there makes the Incineroar much more of a threat. Whereas now you have the possibility of at least scaring it with the Terra Blast water type.
Follow Me from Indeedee means that any single target attacks will not be able to target down that Iron Crown, and we see Wolfe set up Tailwind for speed control. Knockoff will be enough to KO that Indeedee. Will not reveal the item, but we know from open team sheets it's safety goggles. There we go. And then that expanding force, again, unable to connect with the Incineroar, will connect with that Tornadus, bringing it down to 1 HP and revealing the Focus Sash.
I think that's a really nice turner for your Wolfe there. The Trick Room threat is now gone. The Follow Me threat is now gone. You got Tailwind up. You know that your Incineroar is faster than Iron Crown and Tailwind, which can come in handy, especially considering you have the option to, Parting Shot out, make sure it's not getting any of those really strong expanding forces off. And the Focus Sash on Tornadus coming in very handy here because it is able to stick around, possibly set up a Rain Dance if you want to boost your own Urshifu's water type attacks later on in the game. And of course, just keep that Pokemon advantage. You have the tool to switch it out and back in if you need to. And this early on in a game, especially a game as important as this one, I think that's a really smart play from Wolfe.
Yeah, I think that you really have to slow things down in this kind of position, especially when you have an Iron Crown and an Urshifu on the opposing side of the field. Yes, you're not going to be dealing as much damage. You might not secure a knockout this turn or the next turn, but I think the big difference for Wolfe as he navigates into this end game is just getting enough chip damage down onto the opposing Pokemon so that when his Urshifu takes the field, when his final Pokemon takes the field, he can lock in those knockouts. He does take this opportunity to lock in his Terrassalization Grass type into the Incineroar. Urshifu will dodge the Bleak Wind Storm from that Tornadus, which means it will not take any damage this turn, and we see Surging Strikes hit the Incineroar 3 times, but I think the bigger question is, will Iron Crown be able to attack and just knock it out now that the Dark typing's gone?
Exactly. Removing that Terrassalization, removing the Dark type means that there is no longer that Psychic immunity, and because Booster Energy was consumed, that knockoff doesn't even do too much damage.
Yeah, that Incineroar will hold on with a little bit of health from that expanding force, but unfortunately the Tornadus will be KO'd this turn, and Wolfe, while he does still have the advantage of Tailwind on his side, will have to play very carefully, especially seeing how little knockoff did after the Booster Energy activation.
There's an unfortunate Bleak Wind Storm miss there too if you're Wolfe. That Tornadus, considering the Focus Sash, might be trained more offensively, so you maybe expect a lot of damage, if not a 1-hit KO into that Urshifu without that Bleak Wind Storm miss. The Surging Strikes damage, kind of inconsequential though, because you again did Terrastallize into that Grass type, but now this Urshifu coming back in for Wolfe, I believe is also the Choice Scarf, so should be able to attack before Justin's, possibly score a knockout on this Iron Crown with the Surging Strikes. That may be kind of close, but this Urshifu on Justin's side, wouldn't say is really being threatened at all, Gabby.
I don't think it is. And the big question for me is, yes, you can use your Urshifu to knock out the Iron Crown here, but if you don't have a Pokemon in the back that can handle the opposing Urshifu, that might not be your best play. And especially looking at how Wolfe opted in to lock into close combat instead of the Rapid Strike attack, I do think that's an indication that he's trying to optimize for damage on the opposing Urshifu long term, who is currently locked into Surging Strikes. That being said, though, even though those Surging Strikes are not very effective, they are more than enough damage to pick up the KO on Wolfe's Incineroar, bringing the Pokemon score down to 2 Pokemon each.
Yeah, good call out there. You kind of have to lock into close combat at this point. If you do lock into that Surging Strikes, you're giving yourself very few options to damage the Urshifu on Justin's side of the field. Fortunately for Wolfe, Flutter Mane does come out, which is one of the best Pokemon you can possibly have to damage an Urshifu because of that strong Fairy-type Dazzling Gleam or Moonblast. The Hearthflame Ogerpon comes out for Justin, and unlike some of the other ones we've seen throughout the day, this one does carry Follow Me. So considering that close combat is the lock, you don't have to worry about taking a Water-type Surging Strikes in this Urshifu, and you are going to be resisting any damage from this Flutter Mane, so this actually is a pretty good spot for this Ogerpon to come into.
Yeah, and I love how Justin, I believe, locked into the Terastallization on his own Urshifu as well. Now that the final Pokemon has been revealed to be that Flutter Mane, I think you want to just try and get as much damage out from that Pokemon as possible. You don't necessarily want to Terastallize on your own Ogerpon. You can go for the 3 hits into the opposing Urshifu, and with the combination of the attack boost from that and possibly a little extra damage from your Ogerpon as well, that should be enough to lock in the KO and give Justin the advantage here. So we'll see how Wolfe plays his way around this. We do know the Urshifu still locked into close combat, misses the KO on the Ogerpon by just a little bit, unfortunately for Wolfe, but Dazzling Gleam immediately next will pick up the KO on that Ogerpon. It is just Justin's Urshifu left, and with the Surging Strikes, with the Terastallization boost, opts to take out the Flutter Mane.
So it goes to show you just the raw power of Urshifu. That close combat to the full health Ogerpon on Justin's side almost gets fully knocked out and is put in range for just a single Dazzling Gleam from this Flutter Mane, which is a difference maker there. If the Ogerpon is able to get an attack off on this turn, I think the game just kind of immediately ends in Justin's favor. You have the 2v1 with your own Urshifu versus Wolfe's because that Flutter Mane does go down to the Surging Strikes. And now, even though Wolfe's Urshifu is at -2 defense, this Surging Strikes, I don't know if it will be enough because Urshifu, even at -2, has some pretty good defense. This is going to be very close though, Gabby.
This is going to be very close. We see it hit 2 times. It's just below half. We see it hit a third, and it is not enough for the KO. Good information for Justin and Wolfe to know that this turn, Justin's Urshifu went faster, but close combat is indeed enough damage to pick up the knockout. In return, Wolfe Glick up 1 game in the set.
Good info for both players, like you said. Those Choice Scarf Urshifus we did not see interact at the same time without Tailwind up on Wolfe's side until that very turn. Surging Strikes just barely not enough to close out that game for Justin. You have to imagine if Justin had one more turn to attack with maybe the Iron Crown, maybe that Ogerpon that came in and just got immediately knocked out, that could have been a difference maker. But Justin is not able to get past Wolfe's offense. That Flutter Mane coming in at the perfect time, right with Tailwind still running, with Tailwind still up, gives it the chance to attack before that Surging Strikes and claim the victory for Wolfe.
You know, I was also somewhat surprised to see the Flutter Mane in the back for Wolfe, given that I feel like after watching a lot of his games, he likes to have a bulkier Pokemon in the back and usually balances out his teams pretty well. You know, you have your Incineroar and your Tornadus, who are the more supportive roles, and then you have your physical attackers. And for some reason, in that setup, in this matchup in particular, I was looking at this Flutter Mane thinking that's probably going to be the lead with the Scarf Urshifu to sort of clean things up. But Wolfe completely inverted that.
Yeah.
And just looking at how Justin saved the Ogerpon in the back as well, just makes me wonder if maybe he was trying to read into their friendship a little bit too much. And as a result, just barely fell short in the end.
It did. I think the Flutter Mane's a cool bring as a 4th Pokemon there for Wolfe. It is the Booster Energy Special Attack set, which is much different from the speed boosting set with Icy Wind that we've seen a lot lately.
Yeah.
The kind of Booster Energy Special Attack Flutter Mane operates much more similarly to like a Choice Specs Flutter Mane, which is very, very good at coming in at the end of a game and closing it out with that boosted special attack. It's just how Wolfe opted to use it in this game. Obviously, it still can't stand up to the Terra Water Surging Strikes, but that was more than enough for Wolfe in this first game.
Yeah, it was was really just that Dazzling Gleam was all the damage that Flutter Mane needed to do. And as we go into game number 2, we're already seeing a Pokemon adjustment here. Amoonguss and the Landorus Incarnate again versus Justin Carris's Iron Crown and Indeedee lead. This is not necessarily the Pokemon you want to be staring down if you're an Amoonguss.
Yeah, it's not. Amoonguss does not want to be taking these big Psychic-type expanding forces. Fortunately for Wolfe, the Landorus on his side is the Steel Terra. It's not the poison that we see somewhat often for both the defensive and offensive capabilities with Sludge Bomb. So Steel actually will come in very handy here. Will allow it to resist both the Tachyon Cutter and Expanding Force from this Iron Crown if Wolfe needs Landorus to stick on the field here.
And again, it's the Incineroar that is the Pokemon to switch in for the partner of Wolfe's primary attacker. But this time around, Follow Me redirects an Earth Power into the Indeedee. Here comes that Expanding Force. No damage on the Incineroar, but the Landorus is just barely able to hang on.
Yeah, just barely. That's a really big survival from Landorus. That means it will be able to stick around and get at least one more attack off if it chooses to. Obviously, it being the fastest thing on the field here is a massive benefit for Wolfe because an Earth Power would be able to KO the Indeedee. It does not carry Protect, so there's nothing that can switch in there other than Justin's Tornadus that would take even resisted damage from this Earth Power. And of course, Iron Crown itself really cannot take an Earth Power without Terastallizing.
Well, it does look like Justin was considering Terastallization this turn. I can't help but wonder, though, if Wolfe is going to try and Terastallize as well. You know, we did see him Terastallize into that Grass-type Incineroar earlier in game number 1, and that certainly would be something to consider here in game number 2, especially knowing that the Iron Crown on Justin's side of the field is that Terra Water Terra Blast variant that usually can very easily KO opposing Pokemon like Incineroar.
Especially with a possible Helping Hand boost from that Indeedee, which we are seeing come through right now. Helping Hand into the Terra Water Iron Crown.
Who's it going to target? Will have to take an Earth Power first, but without that Steel-type weakness to the Ground-type attacks, it's able to hang on and fire back a Terra Blast into that Incineroar.
Oh.
That is an easy one-hit knockout.
Great play from Justin there. Going for the Helping Hand means that even if Landorus attacks the Indeedee that turn, the Helping Hand goes off first with that booster priority. Terastallizing the Iron Crown not only allows you to survive that Earth Power, but gives you access to the Water-type Terra Blast. Exactly what Justin needed on this turn to take care of that Incineroar. Huge one-hit KO there. Although Flutter Mane coming in here, again, you kind of have to worry about this boosted Dazzling Gleams, especially because Wolfe does have the option to go for that Terastallization of his own here.
I almost think that a Terra Fairy boosted Dazzling Gleam is Wolfe's best out in this situation. Assuming that it is fast enough to outspeed the Iron Crown, you then can threaten definitely the KO on Indeedee, most likely the KO on the Iron Crown, knowing that it's now a Water-type Pokemon and it's already below half its health. And then you just hope that whatever Justin has in the back is also similarly weak to that Flutter Mane. We will see a switch from Wolfe to start things out with the Amoonguss making a return to the field. So a great call from Wolfe, knowing that you either knock out the Iron Crown or in this instance, there's a Protect and Wolfe Moonblast the Indeedee. Again, sending in the Amoonguss on a turn that a Expanding Force seemed so likely from Justin. That was a fantastic read.
Fantastic read, and specifically I think the Moonblast there is really important. If you don't want to waste your Trust, not even waste, if you don't want to use your Terastallization just yet, going straight for the Moonblast into Indeedee, make sure that Trick Room does not go up, which I think is really important for Wolfe in this case, because if Trick Room goes up and the Indeedee is still on the field, you have the option for the Safety Goggles Follow Me, so nothing can get spored. That gives you space to go for more Expanding Forces, which would be pretty bad for Wolfe in this scenario. But Flutter Mane going straight for the Moonblast into the Indeedee on that turn ensures no Trick Room. It ensures damage getting onto the field. Again, there's no Protect in that Indeedee slot, but there is on the Iron Crown, so a smart target there from Wolfe.
Unfortunately for Wolfe, there is still the threat of Follow Me on the field thanks to the Ogerpon Hearthflame Mask, which is most likely why we see that Terastallization lock into the Flutter Mane this turn. Thanks to that extra Fairy-type damage, this Dazzling Gleam should do more than enough to pick up the KO onto the Iron Crown and does a little bit of damage as a bonus to the Ogerpon Hearthflame. But most importantly, without the Iron Crown on the field anymore, the Amoonguss is much more comfy. Could have the opportunity to go for some damage into the Ogerpon, but instead Ivy Cudgel is more than enough to pick up that KO.
Really nice terrestrialization there. Again, the Dazzling Gleam damage is really, really big, especially considering, again, this Hearthflame Ogerpon on Justin's side of the field does carry Follow Me, so you can't rely on Moonblast being able to knock out the Iron Crown. You really need the Dazzling Gleam to do it. And if the Dazzling Gleam doesn't KO, then you just get knocked out by Tachyon Cutter right afterwards. So a good use of terrestrialization to ensure that boosted damage is enough for a KO. Unfortunately, Urshifu coming in here, I think is actually really good for Justin. There's no Tailwind on Wolf's side of the field this time around. The Choice Scarf Urshifu should be able to outspeed both Fluttermane and Landorus. And of course, you can see Landorus at very low HP now. One more attack will be able to knock it out. And a Shadow Ball from Fluttermane probably isn't enough to KO this Ogerpon. We might actually see Justin take this game off the back of this Choice Scarf Urshifu coming in.
I think all Urshifu has to do to lock in the win for Justin is go for Surging Strikes into the Fluttermane. We saw how much damage it did in game number 1, and I don't think you necessarily need the terrestrialization to ensure that KO unless it is some sort of damage roll. And then once the Fluttermane is gone, Landorus really can only attack one Pokemon. Instead, though, we do see the Surging Strikes target down that Landorus for the knockout. So Fluttermane should have the opportunity to attack this turn. And it goes for a Dazzling Gleam with that attack. Not going to do much to the Ogerpon, but is able to get the one-hit knockout onto that Urshifu. So it's all down to Ogerpon for Justin, and it looks like he is hoping that he will find a KO here. It's Woodhammer. There is no grassy terrain, but it's still enough to pick up that knockout and bring us into game number 3.
Who needs terrain when you have a big, big hammer? That is enough for the KO on Fluttermane, sending Justin to game 3 here against Wolfe Glick. I couldn't have asked for more from this set, Gabby. It's been really back and forth so far. Especially between two players of this caliber, like in a win and in at Orlando Regionals. So much fun.
I was honestly surprised at the start of that game number 2 because I think, like Wolf, I wasn't expecting Justin to lead the Iron Crown and Indeedee for a second game in a row. But because he did that, it felt like he just caught Wolf on the back foot with two Pokemon that really did not appreciate that Psychic type combination. And as a result, he was able to try to find some sort of opening, but again, just fell short at the end game.
I think Iron Crown and Indeedee is such a strong combination of Pokemon that, you know, sometimes if you're not sure what to lead, you can just say, oh, I'll just throw these out there and see what happens. And especially how this game played out, it was in a position pretty much the entire game, or for the first few turns at least, that there was not really a big threat into that Pokemon, right? Especially since we saw the huge, you know, Terra Water, Terra Blast play into that Incineroar with the helping hand. That worked out so well for Justin because that eliminated what was really the best answer to that Iron Crown right off the bat.
It did, and it was very clean. I can't help but wonder if that helping hand was there more so to try and anticipate the grass-type terrestrialization on the Incineroar to still do bigger damage, rather than just ensure that it would knock out the still fire-type version of Incineroar.
Yeah. It was cool too. I think Wolf did make some very, very smart plays there, specifically that Moonblast into Indeedee to ensure no Trick Room, and then using the terrestrialization later on to ensure the Dazzling Gleam KO. Unfortunately, just not enough because Ogerpon came in here and immediately took 2 one-hit KOs of its own.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the cool part about Justin's team too, right? You have the really scary Iron Crown that is able to dish out a bunch of damage in Psychic Terrain with that expanding force, and then the Hearthflame Ogerpon comes in and says, okay, it's my turn now, and it also gets KOs of its own. Like, there are so many Pokemon on Justin's team that have the capability to do that much damage that even though you feel like you finally get through one in the Iron Crown, the Ogerpon just comes out and says, okay, what do you got left? And the answer was not enough.
Yeah, and the other cool thing about his team is that you really can mix and match your big attackers.
Yeah.
You can't really bring Iron Crown without Indeedee, but you could certainly bring Indeedee and the Urshifu, or Indeedee and the Regidrago. There is a lot of flexibility to how you can approach these matchups, and I think a lot of the game is just at this team preview. You know, I let Psychic spam once. I let Psy spam twice. Am I gonna lead it a third time? Well, let's find out, because these trainers are ready to go and get into this final game of Pokemon in round 6 of Swiss. The winner of this game will be moving on to play tomorrow, and Wolfe Glick starts it out once again with that Urshifu and the Tornadus with a third Indeedee Iron Crown lead from Justin.
Looks familiar. Exactly the same leads from game 1. I think this is a much safer lead from Wolf here. You have the Focus Sash on Tornadus. You have the option to U-turn with Urshifu, so you give yourself flexibility right off the bat. And if you are Justin here, you kind of have to wonder, you know, is Wolf going to go for a very similar play? Do you have to, you know, commit to this U-turn play right away? The nice thing for Wolf is that if, you know, Justin tries to get fancy and maybe you like Water, Terra Blast the Urshifu slot, you get to U-turn first, and if that Terra Water comes out, you just don't bring your Incineroar in there, right? Like, you just kind of have to.
Well, there it is. We do see that water-type terastallization from Justin onto the Iron Crown to start off game number 3. We have the benefit of knowing that he decided to pick something a little bit different after the terastallization. But Wolfe, here comes the big decision. You have the U-turn, you bring that Indeedee down to about half its health. Do you bring in the Incineroar expecting a Terra Blast, or do you reveal your other Pokemon?
It's such a hard choice here. Incineroar comes in, and if Expanding Force is the choice, it's still a great turn for Wolfe. But if Terra Blast goes into that slot, it's going to be pretty much a disaster.
Bleak Wind Storm does find its target, bringing the Indeedee down into the red and dropping Iron Crown's speed and Indeedee's speed a stage each. And it was the terastallization into Expanding Force. Justin trying to be a little tricky there, but does not catch Wolfe off guard, and the Tornadus will not be KO'd as Indeedee went for Trick Room.
Trick Room does get set up there. Interesting. I think the Terra Water means it's already, you have the option to go for the damage on Incineroar right off the bat. But I think that was a kind of a tricky play from Justin, going immediately for that terastallization, even though it wasn't really necessary, defensively. It kind of forced Wolfe to reconsider bringing an Incineroar. And like we said, if that terastallization primes the Terra Blast into that slot, trying to make the read for U-turn. But Wolfe has to think twice. Do I bring an Incineroar, risking the Terra Blast there, or just bring it in because it's still safe? You probably survive one without a helping hand. And if you go for the Expanding Force, obviously it's a much better swap here, because now the Trick Room is up. Incineroar should be able to attack before the Iron Crown, maybe get a parting shot off, or just knock out this Indeedee. And of course, because Wolfe did not Tailwind, those speed interactions stay the same.
Indeedee will switch out, revealing Justin brought his own Tornadus in the back. A very peculiar pick, knowing that he opted to Trick Room the turn prior. We will see Wolfe lock in the terastallization into that Incineroar for grass typing, so will not be taking super effective damage from the Terra Blast anymore from Iron Crown.
No super effective Terra Blast, but that does, again, open up the option for Expanding Force to connect into that slot. Wolfe opts to protect his own Tornadus, not wanting to take any damage, but Terra Blast comes through. Great terastallization from Wolfe means that this Incineroar will take barely any damage and have the option to attack freely.
One interesting note here about the speed interactions as well. I'm pretty sure it was the speed drop from the Bleak Wind Storm the turn prior that does allow this Iron Crown now to outspeed Incineroar in the Trick Room. So it was great for Wolfe. He was able to take that Terra Blast the previous turn. Now Justin, though, I think can click Expanding Force pretty freely.
He can, yeah, especially now that this Incineroar, again, no longer a grass type. The Tornadus on Wolfe's end has used its Focus Sash up. This Expanding Force can come here pretty freely, and no double protect from this Tornadus on Wolfe's side.
Trying to find an opportunity to stall out Trick Room, unfortunately does not get the double protect on the Tornadus. Incineroar able to hold on through that Expanding Force and get one final attack in here. Will opt to parting shot the opposing Iron Crown to drop its special attack and attack by one stage.
That's what I'm surprised we didn't see come through the prior turn, especially considering you're using that terastallization to keep Incineroar healthy so it can combat this Iron Crown, but instead going for that knock-off to try and kill the Indeedee. Fluttermane, the option here, comes in off the parting shot, will activate its booster energy and boost its special attack thanks to photosynthesis. But Justin's Tornadus has the option to throw out a Bleak Wind Storm here, get some decent damage off there. That's probably Expanding Force range, Gabby, and no speed drop, it looks like. No speed drop. So good for Justin in Tailwind here, or in Trick Room.
And especially knowing that the Psychic Terrain has not expired yet either. Wolfe can't even go for a fake out into that Iron Crown to try and stop it from moving this turn. I think Justin has the momentum on his side, and unfortunately for Wolfe, will have to can protect one turn with the Fluttermane, but will have to potentially opt for a double protect and then must be like a Choice Scarf Aqua Jet or something if you want to at least get some damage onto a Pokemon once the Incineroar has been knocked out. Wolfe does try and flinch the opposing Tornadus, but it does opt for a protect, so no damage this turn. And here comes that Expanding Force. It KOs the Incineroar, but Fluttermane is able to hold on with just a fraction, a sliver of its health, and get one attack in here. Will it be enough to turn the tides?
Moonblast comes out here into this Iron Crown. Huge damage, but not enough for the KO just yet. Really big survival there from that Fluttermane, thanks to the parting shot on the prior turn, lowering the special attack of the Iron Crown. Unfortunately for Wolfe, this Choice Scarf Urshifu comes in, and it cannot Aqua Jet because the Psychic Terrain is up. Indeedee is still around in the back, I believe, so we have the option to reset it up later on in this game, and the Tornadus on Justin's end. Even if Trick Room ends, you can just go for your own Tailwind, because I believe this might be the last turn of Trick Room.
It is the last turn of Trick Room, and it is, I think, the last turn of that Psychic Terrain as well. Fluttermane able to protect this turn, but that Urshifu will be taking the full power of this Expanding Force, minus the parting shot that dropped the special attack, but that is not enough to protect it from a KO. Knocked out in a single hit. Now Tornadus able to go on the offense with Bleakwind Storm, but Wolfe down to his final Pokemon with Trick Room expiring and with Tailwind available to Justin. It seems like Justin will be taking the win here in just a turn.
That's really well played from Justin there. Preserving that Indeedee to reset up that Psychic Terrain later on if needed, I think was very smart. But of course, making great use of the Trick Room of those 4 turns it was available, making sure that Iron Crown stuck around as long as possible to get those huge Expanding Forces off.
And not only that, playing it super safe this turn, opting to swap in the Indeedee, drop the special attack drop that was present on that Pokemon earlier, and ensure that Tailwind is 100% set up so that the Iron Crown should outspeed the opposing Fluttermane for the KO. So even though it looks like Wolfe may have found his footing here, I think Justin found the way to guarantee that Tailwind gets up. And you still have your Ogerpon on top of all that.
You sure do. The Ogerpon and Iron Crown will easily be enough to dispatch this Fluttermane and send Justin into day 2 here in Orlando. I believe Justin also made it into the top cut last year in Orlando before we had the day 2 structure at regionals. So even though they're both Charlotte regional champions and Wolfe's the defending Orlando champion, Justin's saying, hey, I can play down here in Florida too.
Yeah, and even though Wolfe did lose this round, Justin moving on undefeated, 7-0 to compete tomorrow, of course, in day 2, but also for a couple more Swiss rounds here today. I don't think you can necessarily count either of these trainers out at this point.
No.
Like you said, Justin